Welkom bij Diversity Stories, aflevering 2.
Wij zijn
Silas,
Nina
en Pelumi. De bijdrage die ik heb, die ging over namen. En die van Christine en Delano ging over kunst en politiek. En de laatste?
Nobody Cares.
Zo heet het, maar het is wel interessant hoor.
Zeker. Maar de jouwe is ook interessant. Kun je daarmee
dankjewel.
over vertellen?
Ja, dat kan ik doen. Het gaat over namen en ik heb dus een aantal mensen over hun naam geïnterviewd. En eigenlijk om te kijken wat de betekenis is en hoe je met een bijzondere naam bejegend wordt. Dus probeer het thema diversiteit van die manier te benaderen. En weet je wie een bijzondere naam heeft? Pelumi?
Nou, dat blijkt dus wel mee te vallen. Maar dat hoor je in het item nu. Mijn naam is Pelumi Adejumo. Pelumi Adejumo. In Nederland is het een bijzondere naam. En de taal is Yoruba. En dat is een taal gesproken in Nigeria, in West-Afrika. En in Nigeria hebben ze meer dan 100 talen, geen dialecten. En Yoruba is een van de bekendste, meest gesproken talen. Ik ben geboren in Nigeria en we zijn op mijn 5e geëmigreerd naar Nederland in Os. Dus ik woon sinds mijn 5e in Os. Het is een neutrale naam. Het wordt gebruikt voor jongens en meisjes en alles daartussenin. Dus het is daar een heel normaal bekende naam. Het is net zoiets als Jantje. Als ik aan de telefoon praat met mensen, als ik bijvoorbeeld een pizza wil bestellen, dan zeg ik een andere naam, want dat is sneller. Ik zeg soms wel Anne of zo. Ook als ik dingen moet invullen, bijvoorbeeld op straat word je wel eens aangesproken voor iets en dan willen ze je naam opschrijven. Dan begin ik met spellen. Wat er ook is met mijn naam, in Nigeria is het wel een bekende naam, maar het is ook een naam. Als je die zegt, dan weten mensen meteen uit welke tribe, stam je komt. Dus dan, omdat het in die taal is. Pelumi betekent volg mij. En daarvoor zeg je dan Jesu Pelumi. En dat betekent Jezus is met mij. Mijn ouders zijn christelijk. Het blijft onderdeel van wie ik ben, omdat ik zo ben opgevoed. Maar ik probeer me ervan te distancieren. Maar er zijn toch aspecten ervan waar ik niet van los kan komen. Ik moet me ertoe verhouden. Als iemand vraagt naar mijn naam, dan gaat het niet over dat het Nigeriaans is, maar het is christelijk. En daar kan ik met mensen mee bonden die net als ik proberen los te komen van het christendom. Of die daar juist heel veel troost in vinden. Dat eigenlijk. Ik merk ook dat in mijn schrijven ik dat heel erg tegenkom. Dat ik, als ik zou moeten vrijschrijven over seks of wat dan ook, dan is mijn eerste neiging om dan, als ik gewoon vrijschrijf, dus niet nadenk, dan lees ik iets wat super bekrompen is of heel timide is. En dan, dat weet ik, dat komt door mijn opvoeding. Of ik schrijf iets dat over grenzen heen gaat. En dan weet ik dat dat komt omdat ik daar juist tegenin wil gaan. Snap je? Onbewust, bewust of onbewust, ben ik daarmee bezig. Ik ben me bewust van waar dingen vandaan komen. En of ik dat wil, het is niet erg dat het zo is, maar wil ik dat? En wat zeg ik daarmee? En wil ik dat anders doen? En voor wie dan? En waarom? Ja, ik was van jongs af aan, ik stelde heel veel vragen. Wat confronterend is voor ouders, denk ik. Dus ik was altijd dingen aan het bevragen en mijn eigen waarheden aan het creëren. En ik was daar heel erg mee bezig met Christen zei wat het betekent en wat het betekent om iets te kunnen doen voor mensen. En ik leerde zingen. En toen ik in de 2e van de middelbare school kwam, toen was ik 14, denk ik. Toen realiseerde ik me wat mijn eigen idealen zijn en dat die niet overeenkomen met de idealen van mijn ouders. Zeker wat betreft homoseksualiteit, omdat ik biseksueel ben. En daarmee geconfronteerd word. En ik merk dat daar geen ruimte voor is. En ook de verhoudingen. Dat is natuurlijk niet binnen alle kerkelijke gemeenten, maar binnen de onze is er duidelijk een man-vrouw verhouding. Die ik niet prettig vind. En ook omdat mijn moeder pastoor is, werd ik verplicht om me te laten dopen. Want dat moet dan in sommige plekken op mijn 16e. En dat was zo heftig, omdat ik dat echt niet wilde. En toen heb ik dat toch laten gebeuren. En dat was een moment waarop ik compleet emotioneel ook niet meer betrokken was. Daar ben ik over mijn eigen grens heen gegaan. Toen ik wilde stoppen met naar de kerk komen, toen zei ik dat ik dat gewoon niet kan. Het werd gewoon, mentaal werd dat te veel voor mij. Omdat ze daar ook vanwege cultuur gaan ze daar ook op een bepaalde manier met kinderen om. En ik vind dat heel onaangenaam. En ja, ik denk dat ik 17 was. Toen ik echt gewoon zei van nee, ik wil dit niet. Ze heeft zich verontschuldigd voor het laten dopen. Ze zei dat dat een van haar grootste fouten was. En daar was ik wel blij mee om. Maar af en toe vraagt ze dan of ik kom om te zingen of om foto's te maken. En dat bedoelt ze niet zo, maar het is weer, ze heeft toch ergens een soort van hoop dat ik dan op mijn 30ste het licht zie. Ze heeft een bepaalde wereldbeeld en voor haar ga ik naar de hel. Snap je? En dat is super heftig en dat doet pijn, omdat ze daar echt in gelooft. Het is alles waar zij voor leeft en je eigen dochter, die wil dat niet. Dat is heel pijnlijk. En het is ook lastig omdat ik haar pijn begrijp en daarin nog steeds doe wat ik wil daarin. Maar daarnaast heb ik ook wel ervaringen gehad in de kerk die ik niet kan ontkennen. Dat het iets bovennatuurlijks was. Ik kan het niet ontkennen, maar ik kan het ook niet bevestigen. Maar ik merk ook dat als ik bang ben, ik wel een bepaalde troost kan vinden in de gedachte dat er iemand is om over mij te waken. Als er, zeg maar, in alles in de kerk, alle dingen waar ik het niet mee eens ben of moeite mee heb, maar muziek, je kan dat religie noemen, maar met een groep mensen samen zijn en dan je gedachten op één ding zetten en één zijn, dat doet iets met de atmosfeer. Jesu lola bara togo. Jesu lola bara oba titilai. Jesu lola bara togo. Jesu lola bara oba titilai. Talo dabire, Jesu talo dabire. Alabara talo dabire. Oloruwo talo dabire. Alabara oba tobe ogo, carry ogo. Latinu ogo, losinu ogo. Ọba tí kì í sú, Jésù tí kì í rẹ̀, ta ló dàbí rẹ̀ o? Alábàárà, ta ló dàbí rẹ̀? Jésù, ta ló dàbí rẹ̀? Alábàárà, ta ló dàbí rẹ̀? Ọlọ́run o, ta ló dàbí rẹ̀? Alábàárà, ọba tó bẹ́ ògo, kárí ògo. Látinú ògo, lọ sínú ògo, ọba tí kì í sú, ọba tí kì í rẹ̀, ta ló dàbí rẹ̀ o? Alábàárà. Ja, ik had misschien alleen gewild dat het niet zo'n christelijke lading had. Maar dat past ook weer bij mijn identiteit. Ik had niet Anne of zo willen heten, want dat zou een beetje ontkennen wie ik ben.
En dit was een item van Silas over de naam van Plumi, dus dan mag ik het afkondigen. En het volgende item gaat over kunst en politiek.
Ja, precies. En dat is van Christine en Delano. En die hebben een gesprek over kunst en politiek.
Ze zijn twee bare students van de ArtEZ.
Ja, beeldende kunstenaars. En ze hebben het daarover in hoeverre kunst geëngageerd moet zijn. Of geëngageerd al van zichzelf is.
Ja, en hoeveel ruimte daarvoor is.
Ja, en in hoeverre bijvoorbeeld het doorbreken van je bubbel ook al geëngageerde kunst is. Dat vond ik heel interessant. Nou, voor meer luister even dat gesprek.
Well, should I introduce my work briefly?
What's the inspiration behind your work?
I work a lot with aesthetics and conventions around aesthetics throughout time. Like, for example, I'm inspired by constructivism.
Mm-hmm.
Constructivism had a certain ideology in a certain time, which was more related to society.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I use the shapes and the formal language they use, but I don't have the ideology. So the aesthetics of it become way different. So they create a new movement, which in our time, where everything is possible within the arts, is creating new aesthetics, new sorts of aesthetics. And I then combine them with like color schemes, like for instance, I made a work now that has like soft colors, like pastel, or like in constructivism they didn't use that. They used pure colors, like real dense colors, and so I'm mixing them up to create a new aesthetic in our time with the aesthetic values and the conventions of that time. And like, if I remember correctly, your work is more like political. Like, can you elaborate a bit on what you do?
Yeah, of course. Well, my work is mainly drawn from like experiences that I've had. I think when you're like a black woman in a space that is predominantly white, there will be a different lens or gaze employed when looking at your work. Like my main inspiration comes from the fact that I left home when I was 18. This was 10 years ago.
Because where you're from?
Uganda.
Uganda. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. And most of my family lives there. I left home to pursue an overseas, to study overseas, right? And I started with computer science in Russia, then I lived in New York, and then I came to the Netherlands. But when I left home, it was the first time that I was confronted with the fact that I'm different. I am black. I was like, oh shit. Because in Uganda, everyone just looks like me.
Yeah, because it's then all common, like.
Yeah, you're not confronted with these differences. And all these experiences made me start to look at my culture, my upbringing from like a distance. And it just so happens that, when you're a minority in a certain dominant space, if you're tackling even your own experiences, people will say it is political. In my tutor group, right, and also from talking to other people from the ArtEZ, I heard that sometimes students feel pressured to make like socially engaged works. Did you ever feel this way in your tutor group?
Well, not at all, actually. Like, a lot of people have the tendency to make political art. Also, within the fields of art, political or socially involved art is like a certain standard. That became like a certain standard. But I didn't feel like I had to. Like, there's a certain freedom you can take as an artist. So, no, I didn't feel that way, but I can imagine that people feel the pressure. Like, but that's the thing, I'm trying to break through certain conventions. Like, yeah, that might be the difference, and certain people want to go and advance through those certain conventions that are there. Like, Because did you feel pressure to make art from inspired by your background, or like you could also have like you mentioned the study in Russia, like you could also make work that is inspired by the thing you did there, like
computer science.
Computer science. No, but it would be possible, right?
Yeah, it would be possible, but I'm more drawn to like I don't know, experiences and issues that affect me, but also affect people like me, or it's hard for me sometimes to make art just for the sake of it, with no message, because I'm always trying to communicate something with the viewer, the person who looks at my work, and I find it hard to just make something. I would love to just make something
without thinking of
I find that really fascinating. And most of the artists that I look up to, like Jodorowsky, he does deal with the human condition, but he's not addressing anything like political or social. He's just doing it because there's this poetic language that he has and he wants to share it with people or just himself and things like that. Who is like an artist who inspires you?
Well, I'm thinking of Lissitzky right now. He's a Russian constructivist. And the thing is, like, it's so contradictory. Like, he really wanted his ideas to be implemented into society. Everything he made was used to, like, he made drawings, paintings, also sculptures, but the purpose of them were like to be implemented into social structures like buildings, and especially to guide people. But I just take the formal aspects of it. I'm not interested at all in the social aspects. Like, there's a whole social aspect just by the placement of it, without even placing it into society. Like, if you place an artwork in a museum, it also has a social aspect for a certain sense, but it's not the focus point of it. So, like, and it's the same with the artist you mentioned. Like, the focus point isn't there, but in some way, as an artist, you're always connecting to an audience, and in that sense, you're always. But the difference is the focus point, I guess.
Maybe the intention of the artist.
Yeah, the intention indeed.
I agree. But if you also choose to like focus on the formal aspects, aren't you being political in a way?
Yeah, in a certain sense you are, because you're reacting on society.
Yeah.
Like, aesthetics of society are also part of society. But it's not the focus point, but you need it. Like, there's always a balance between things. Like, and in that sense, I also need like social aspects, because otherwise I won't have anything to react on. Like, that's sharp. Sharp comment. Because do you want to change something with your work?
I want to make some issues visible, but sometimes I feel like I also don't understand why certain things happen in the world, and I'm just trying to find a way to address it. Like the most recent project that I've been working on involves the spate rape and murders of like 23 women from Uganda. Like, this thing started happening last year in May, and it took months before the authorities started to really do something about it, and it really angered me. Because domestic violence, sexual violence, gender-based violence, particularly against women, is like a serious issue in Uganda, especially among within rural areas. But at the same time, it's something that people don't really talk about, because there's this stigma. I don't know, in an African culture, the things that happen in within the four walls of your house, it stays there. You can't go airing out your dirty laundry. So when it comes to issues like this, people don't want to be looked at in a certain way. And there are also cultural traditions like like female genital mutilation, widow inheritance, like really these traditions that should not even be practiced in the 21st century.
In modern society,
but they still happen. And so with that project, I just wanted to give visibility to the women, but also find a way to like lift them up, because despite the fact that they were killed in a very, very inhumane way, they still matter, their stories still matter. And that's why I made like an installation with this found and also purchased photo frames from a secondhand store. To me, it symbolized like stories of people within those houses that we don't know about, but they're important nevertheless, you know. And I just wanted to put that across for myself first, but also for the person who sees the work.
Do you think it matters if you, like, not from Uganda, but making art about Uganda when you're not from around there? Like,
you can't. It's hard to talk about something that you haven't experienced personally. I think you'll always have a limitation. But I think if you address this from the beginning, like as a starting point, that you're just maybe gazing at a culture, I don't know, then it's not so much about appropriation. Because usually what I see from Western artists, they take elements of like Ugandan or other African countries, like things, the visual aspects usually that intrigue them. But then in those places, there's a cultural or there's some kind of depth that those cultures have in that visual representation, and this person just takes it and appropriates it and transforms it into something else, which can be really great. Like if you look at the works of like Picasso, it's really great, but then it kind of the authenticity or the original story then is lost. I don't despise artists who do this, but I think there should be an awareness in what you're doing. Don't just say, "Oh, I didn't know. I just, like
just
this."
took it away just
for the sake of it. I don't think it's right.
Can you see it the other way around? Like,
that's the difficult thing. I have never seen a
You've never seen that before. Like, talking about conventions, that's why I mentioned it. Like, I never seen it the other way around, actually. Like, the Western people are mostly appropriating stuff from African countries, even Asian countries. But the other way around, it's so hard. It's so hard. Like, maybe that would create a new political awareness, even. Like, just switching it up. Like, hey, stay away from my culture, and then but we're doing that in that sense, creating a certain awareness. Like,
I wonder why
it's weird.
People don't do that.
Maybe because they also know how it feels, like if other cultures intervene in their culture, maybe. But it's weird
they're just not inspired by it.
That can
like,
also be
in my situation,
more despising it than being inspired by it.
Because personally, I'm not inspired by like typical Dutch things. For some reason, I wish I could. It would be interesting, but I just don't feel the urge to like appropriate or take some elements and then But it could be super interesting if someone did that.
Because I've never seen it before. Thinking about it, no.
What is the issue with like people who want to make a change in the world and use art? Do you feel like you can never justify, like, because you mentioned that the art world is like a bubble, right? And you're trying to make a change within this bubble. But shouldn't you be out there trying to affect like...
Like, I also have problems with the art world being a bubble. Like, I also want to change the art world, and by changing the art world, those works will have value. Like, they would really change something. Like, my father, for example, doesn't like art at all. Like, he would just walk into a museum and think, whatever, and I'm out again. So it's a pity, because there are so much things that aren't said, aren't known to a great majority of the world. Like, why keep them at a small group of, well, let's say, intellectuals? Like, why just keep it there? Why not broaden it? And to me, like, just working with formal aspects, everybody can relate in a certain sense to a certain form.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I'm also trying to break loose the conventions of that art bubble, and then everything is possible again. So
I get what you're trying to, what you're saying. Yesterday I was reading this essay by Susan Sontag. It's called Against Interpretation, I think, and she mentions exactly what you're saying. Like, like art has become so focused on like content, you know, and ideology, and the formal aspects are like secondary to like the reasons artists are making work. And for like regular people, they're not able to process the content behind like a cup. You position your cup in a museum and you have like this long essay about this cup.
And they don't have anything to enter that way of thought. Like,
so then art becomes just limited to this group of like intellectuals who are just going on and on about this thing, but it excludes the masses. And so it's super interesting that you should say this is your intention with the...
That's in a certain way also political.
But
on a different level.
It is.
And in that sense, it's more like art for art's sakes, but it still is political in a certain sense.
You're even critiquing the art world.
I'm critiquing the artwork world a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that you say that. Like,
Does your background kind of inform what you do now?
Can you elaborate? Like,
I don't know about your upbringing, or you said you were a very creative child from the beginning, but are there aspects of like how you grew up, I don't know, things that kind of come into your work? Because I can imagine if you're an artist, like there are personal things that always come through.
There are always personal things,
And the way you've described your work, it seems very rational also.
Well, like, for example, using buildings, like, I was a bit of a problem child, like, in that sense also a bit radical. I grew up just with my father and my mother. My father is adopted, he doesn't know where he comes from, so I don't know either, but he's also not white, so it's also a bit weird. But the thing is, I don't want to make art about that. But for me, I've been in the streets like a lot of time, spent a lot of time there doing bad things, just let's call it bad things. But there's also a certain inspiration, like there are certain cultural groups that aren't actually connected to just some place. Like all different cultural groups can connect to a certain place, and that might inspire me. Like a building might be neutral in the sense like it isn't bound to a culture of our time, it's bound to a culture of a previous time. So in those conventions also change, like also the conventions that I had as a child, like growing up like doing bad shit, I came into contact with a lot of people, a lot of different things, and all those conventions started to shift. And so yeah, there might be a personal background in it, but I don't want to emphasize on that. I don't know why, I just don't want to be seen that way, I guess. Like, I don't know. I'm like almost the complete opposite. That's funny, but I can still get your approach to it.
And I also understand your approach to it, actually.
Dit waren Christine en Delano. We gaan nu door naar Nobody Cares. Laatste item van vandaag. En
Nobody Cares is onze vaste column van Azo en Zede.
Ja, 2 Turkse expats komen bij elkaar om als een moderne
Stadler en Waldorf.
te klagen over zo'n beetje alles. En in deze aflevering gaat het over gewoontes.
Ja, goed vertaald. Social customs.
Well, I have been going bra-free for the last 2 years.
Nobody cares. As someone who's no social butterfly, it was hard enough navigating the societal norms of the country I grew up in. And now I have a completely different set of unwritten rules to figure out and navigate.
Nobody cares.
We are stuck on a piece of rock hurtling through space at 1,000 miles per hour, with a finite shelf life full of uncertainties.
Join us as we complain our way through the distance towards a modicum of joy. I'm curious, what's the best thing about living in Germany for you?
That sounds a bit like what is best in life. To crush your enemies, to see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women.
Yeah, well, yeah, let's get serious. I'm curious, really. Like,
It's the freedom, like the freedom I feel.
like the freedom in the yeah, that only reminds me of the mooning scene in the Braveheart. But yes, freedom. I get it.
It probably sounds ridiculous to our Dutch audience, but it's quite an experience for Turkish citizens like us, like people who grew up in, I don't know, Middle Eastern countries maybe, or you know.
Yeah, that's a thing. Yes.
Yeah.
For me, I think it's the feeling of security here. The best thing about living in Netherlands, yes, I think it's the feeling of security. For instance, like knowing that I can wherever, whatever I want, whenever I want. And as I said, like I've been going bra-free for the last 2 years and nobody cares, I know. What a relief, actually. I can bike with a dress, I can go take a sun bath in the park. Can you believe I started to wear skirts again, actually?
Yeah, that's like what I meant by freedom of expression, freedom of press, and you know the other stuff, the big stuff. I'm not fully there yet, you know.
Yeah.
They kind of require more advanced degree of integration, I guess, you know, to get like a sort of getting used to the small things. But wearing short shorts and a tank top in summer without worrying about the looks and comments I would most certainly get in Istanbul, that is something I won't take granted for a while. People, they just don't look at me like that. That you know, that look, so that it's a permeating sort of judging, harassing kind of look. And I'm so happy that I left that in Istanbul.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like that we can't wear what we want in Istanbul, but there might be consequences. And as a woman, as a wearer of that stuff, knowing that I will be seen as the one who asked for it, it's, well, it is still suffocating me, to be honest.
Yeah. There might not be consequences if one is above a certain level of income and restricts one's movements to certain quarters, to certain mode of transport, etc. But otherwise, we've both been there, and it's awful. It feels awful.
Yeah, let's hashtag me too here. It's like a, and then I guess every woman in Turkey can contribute that hashtag. It's default, and that is really, really sad. In the Netherlands, everyone seems to respecting not only my bodily autonomy, but also my opinion as well, just because it's my opinion, you know. And I remember a fight with a friend back in Istanbul who couldn't accept that my favorite sci-fi author is Asimov, because his favorite was Ursula. May she rest in peace.
Yeah.
I remember yelling at the end that Asimov is my favorite and she is your favorite, and like, what's the issue here? I think this might explain the never-ending problem of othering and the division that's wreaking so much havoc in the Turkey right now. Well, it's kind of everywhere, but yes.
Yeah, I actually tried explaining all that to my German husband, and he still has like no clue. But I disagree with you on the part where my opinions are respected. It could be that we move in very different circles. Like, you know, I'm most surrounded by kind of older people, you know, retired people. But but I experienced a mid-sized yet disturbing amount of dismissal. I mean, at times my German isn't like that perfect yet, or I'm not satisfied with it yet, and it's sometimes interpreted as a lack of general intelligence. And sometimes I feel like I'm just dismissed and I'm being treated like a child, you know, a sort of, what do you know about it attitude.
Yeah, life is life and men are men, or as we would explain it in Turkish, a Turkish man seems to have emerged from within your German husband. Maybe we can call it like that. Maybe our understanding of respect is different in that sense. Another cultural code that we currently can't recognize. Maybe I'm mostly forced to sit in the meetings where all the conversations takes place 100% in Dutch for hours.
Oh God!
And now and then they turn to me and say, "Oh, so but you understand Dutch?" No, like I'm like with capital letters. No, I don't understand. I can only understand if you are talking about trees or students. Like I can understand the general concept of it, and I'm kind of sick and tired of explaining it. I just nod and I hope if there's something important that concerns me, they will remember and switch to English, or alert me by mentioning my name. And so I will know, I will ask. And it's quite rude, in my opinion, to make me sit there as if I am a glass of water on the table.
But before we dig even deeper into the cultural codes and shocks, I want to talk a bit more about my surroundings in Germany and how they impact my life. So you already know I live in a tiny village inhabited mostly by retirees and retirees-to-be. And I can walk around in whatever I want, basically. There are fields and little woods around the village, and when I'm taking a walk at whatever time of the day or night that I want, my only concerns are like the weather and the wildlife. So it's like, will I be hit by a thunderstorm?
That's the only.
So, will I possibly encounter boars? So I'm supposed to be on the lookout for wildlife crossings, like when we drive at dusk or dawn, you know?
Yep.
Just imagine that, like real live deer that might at any moment cause you to crash your car and die.
That seems like a nice way to go.
Or like real foxes visiting the backyard and leaving you torn between encouraging them because foxes, yay! And shooing them away because we have cats and that they don't really mix well.
Wow, come on, like that reminds me of your amazing story of feeding the ducks. Do you remember? Like please, you have to share it, please, one more time.
Okay, that one is really a classic. So it's 2007, and I'm living in Germany for a 9-month period to improve my German. It didn't happen, really. But maybe it did, but anyways, that's besides the point. So back then, going down to the riverside and watching and feeding the ducks and geese and swans was among my favorite activities because it was one of the cheapest things to do, and I was poor as usual. So one day, I'm by the river with my cheapest bag of bread, and 2 strangers approached me suddenly. They asked me if I'm feeding the duckies, which I obviously am, and then proceed to inform me that it is verboten, or at the very least not allowed. I don't remember the exact wording anymore.
I mean, just because of that story, I am really terrified to feed any kind of animal here out in the wild, really. I'm like, you just give me a trauma.
Yeah, as a Turkish citizen with a healthy fear of any and all authorities, I just blanch immediately and start stuttering apologies. I'm fully aware that not being aware of a law does not exempt one from it. And they asked to see my passport, which I also always carry on me because, again, Turkish citizen here I. And afterwards, they seemed to be satisfied with giving me an oral warning. I lived in fear of the duck police for the rest of my stay in Germany, while anyone and everyone I told this story to laughed and laughed.
Well, I mean, it's impossible not to laugh, really. I mean, the duck police, it's so cute. I mean, it's simply brilliant.
Well, we now have hedgehogs, birds and crows visiting our backyard. And we usually donate the leftover cat food to them. And we got no fines so far.
And then speaking of feeding, I know you also experience like neighbor-friend visits where you almost starved. I remember that they had lectured us about life in general in the Netherlands at the beginning of my study. And I shall look for those papers, but I can clearly remember that they advise us not to touch any food on the table unless we have been invited to get some, or leave the house before 5:30 dinner time. Well, dinner time, yes. And like, you know, like in Turkey, you would end up being fed until you can't breathe anymore, and tea after fruits, after tea after dessert, and after coffee. And one might be lucky if he or she managed to leave the house before midnight. I'm not saying that it should be like this, but yeah, you know what I mean.
It is like that, yeah. Yeah, I know very well. I remember a particularly shocking visit where we were expected for coffee around 10 or so. And this is in Germany, of course. And it was about like 45 minutes of driving from where we live. So I stopped at a bakery and got some really nice stuff we could have with the coffee.
Common sense, yes.
Yeah, and when we got there, I gave nice stuff to the lady of the house and said, here's something like we could have with coffee, you know, to prevent any misunderstandings. Yes. And afterwards, we sat down and had coffee and nothing. A big, fat nothing with coffee. I had to sit there starving because I didn't have any breakfast yet for over an hour with nothing, absolutely nothing, with a smile on my face. I mean, I survived it thanks to my Chechnyan heritage and upbringing.
Well, for the audience, like I have, like you have no idea of her capabilities. Actually, when she's hungry, she will turn into green and like grow prodigiously like a Hulk wants food, kind of getting green.
Yeah, so afterwards we had to dash to a bakery before I murdered someone. And later on I was informed by my German family that our hosts were certainly very, very perplexed and possibly somewhat offended because I brought them goodies. Like, it might be understood or interpreted by them as, you know, I think you're too poor to get this stuff for yourself.
Yeah, like...
Yeah. It's a German.
I mean, that's what I mean by cause and shocks. Like we have to spare another episode to talk about them further, obviously. But we can maybe end now by sharing the story of the first ever robot who had been reformatted because it interpreted a Turkish minister's speech and was made to apologize to him. Have you seen that? Like, it's like, no words left, Kanka, no words. Like,
I mean, I think turning the minister off and then on again might have proved more successful, but I guess we'll never know.
This is also Aksu, up-and-coming complaint master of Arnhem and sought-out troubleshooter.
This is Zaida Fürstenberger, she who is doomed to weird names and the resident crone of southern Germany.
Signing off until our next anxiety attack or whatever.
Nobody cares.
Dit was Nobody Cares. En zo ook de tweede aflevering van Diversity Stories.
We moeten even iedereen voorlezen die daaraan meegedaan heeft, hè?
Diversity Stories is het initiatief van Studium Generale ArtEZ.
En in deze aflevering bijdragen van...
Silas Neumann, Christine Ajo, Delano Berendsen, Aksu Aksu en Zaide Fürstenberger.
Voor meer informatie, kijk in de show notes.
Tot de volgende keer.
Tot de volgende keer.
Hold on. Tell you what, Snake. Hold on. Wait a minute.